Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Big welcome in, GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Give us a follow on Twitter before we even get started. Come on, at GSMC_baseball. Love to see you follow us there. Excited that we are moving forward and a little bit closer to the sport of baseball getting underway, right? It's a long period. It's a long dead period where nothing is underway. There's no baseball whatsoever. And this is honestly the most empty time in terms of baseball stories. I mean, I looked all day, and you know, there's a lot of some signings to talk about. Pedro Strop to the Reds for $1.8 million, but right now the teams are set. The teams are about ready to go. We do have some major trade rumors to dive into, but we've talked about that on this show. It's just now more confirmed, and what I said last week seems to be coming into play. It seems to be transpiring. It's about when Mookie Betts is dealed, not if he is dealed. And we said that on the show a week ago, but we'll dive into that a little bit later in the show. So we're going to have some fun with today's episode. It'll be a shorter show, and we'll probably have some shorter shows as we lead into spring training. And once spring training gets rolling, we can really start to dive into divisions. We will have division by division previews before spring training even gets started. But spring training, still a month away. We're just getting started in the month of February, 20 days away. That's pretty much a month until spring training gets rolling. But let's get rolling with what I think is a really interesting topic if you're a baseball fan. And last night was the Super Bowl. Last night was the largest event, not just in sports, but in television. Largest event in music, largest event in entertainment, largest event for many companies because of the amount of eyes that are on the Super Bowl. And on a baseball podcast, why on earth are we talking about the Super Bowl? Well, I think an interesting question for baseball fans is, why on earth is the World Series not as popular as the Super Bowl? Because there were times before the Super Bowl existed, and then at the beginning of the Super Bowl, when the World Series was more popular. And the easiest answer to this, and I think one that is an answer that should frankly be repeated, and it's probably the number one reason, is the very evidence of one game. The Super Bowl is a singular game. It is an event. It is Super Bowl Sunday. You plan for it. You have a party for it. It's on a Sunday. It's at a reasonable time. Everybody can get together for it. One game to decide it all. No series. Will always be more impactful. Will always draw more eyes. Will always draw a bigger audience than a World Series. It's just always going to be like that. And that's because of the one game. But what are the reasons beyond the one game? What are the reasons beyond this singular event that make the Super Bowl more popular than the World Series? One, I think the NFL is just better at promotion. I mean, just better at promoting the event, at hyping it up, creating a whole media week for it, leading into this one magical moment. And how could baseball even do that with the World Series? I'm not really sure. And I'm sure they've tried different things, and there have been different media outings and different ways to try to hype up the World Series. But they kind of just rely on the fact that it is the World Series. While the Super Bowl, just like the NFL, every single year seems to get better. The Super Bowl and the NFL every single year seem to try something different. A big example from this game, the new scoreboard at the bottom of the screen. At first, I didn't like it at all. I was kind of taken aback. I'm like, man, that's in the middle. It's really drawing my eyes. I'm not sure I like it. I still don't know if I like it. But they tried it. It's something new. They took a risk. Fox, in the Super Bowl, bring this logo out. First game of the year they use it. And I like the risk taking. I like the trying something different. And the World Series just doesn't have that. Now, I'm not even sure I have a solution on how to get the World Series like the Super Bowl. But it's one of those things that baseball should at least attempt. And that's what we want baseball to do. We want baseball to attempt to get better, to attempt to bridge the gap. And they've done that on a public relations side in terms of the way they promote the game. Playing loud. I love that commercial. I love that phrase. I love that baseball is leaning into the young, the powerful hitters, right? The fastball pitchers. We play loud. We celebrate. This is a fun game, a game with energy, a game with brilliant moments of athleticism, brilliant moments of power and speed. That is a great way to advertise baseball. But you can only advertise baseball so far, and I can think that baseball is getting cooler, has more athletes, has more stars, and you can run a good campaign, but it's not necessarily going to get the entire country to care about your biggest event, the World Series, like the NFL has mastered with the Super Bowl. The World Series will never be the Super Bowl. It doesn't need to be. But taking steps towards the Super Bowl would be really nice. Better media coverage, not media coverage, it's not really up to baseball, but a better media event, more access. I don't know. That's one of those things that people smarter than me, people with more PR background, people with more media experience, people with more promoting sports experience need to try and tackle. Because unless you get a fantastic series with two starving fan bases and a major market, like Chicago and Cleveland in 2016, the World Series is just difficult to get as a major event. The 2016 World Series was the last time I really remember the World Series being a major event, where everybody on my timeline and everybody in the world, it felt like, was talking about that World Series. Big reason for that, there was a Game 7. Game 7s are pretty close to World Series. Why? One game to decide it all. People love that stuff. One game to decide it all, where every pitch, every moment, every mistake is costly. Every play that's fantastic could have won you the championship. It has weight. It matters. And it's so important for sports to add urgency to what they're doing. Now, how can you add urgency to a 7-game series? It's difficult. And frankly, you probably won't be able to accomplish it the same way that football is able to accomplish it in the Super Bowl. But making it your prime event, really hyping it up, giving space for it, and putting it at a reasonable time, please. And the World Series so many times has been at ridiculous times. Put it at a time where the Central Time Zone is watching it just after they get off of work, where the West Coast catches the end of the game after they get off of work, and the East Coast kids can stay up for the whole game, right? And baseball's been tackling this time thing for a long time, and they've gotten better at it in some points and worse in others, and it just never feels consistent. It never feels like they have a direction, an image of what they want to do, of where they want to go. And that's been baseball's problem, not just in making the World Series a better event, but the entire sport. Now we're seeing some movements forward. We're seeing the 3-batter rule. We're seeing these positive changes. They're umping mics. They're miking umps, umping mics. They're miking umpires, which I don't know if that'll work. And honestly, I really doesn't make me like baseball more or like baseball less, and I probably won't really care about it at the end of the day, but it is an interesting idea. It's trying something. It's trying to be different. It's trying to be engaging. It's trying to be, trying. It's just trying. And hopefully baseball can start to do that. And I think that we haven't really noticed that baseball's trying to make these changes because of this cheating scandal, which the cheating scandal, time and time again, players are moving this thing backwards by continuing to complain about it. This thing that so many other teams were doing, but then we're told to stop, and then all teams except the Astros stopped, but all the other teams were doing it. They're going to scream at the top of their lungs that it's ridiculous that the Astros did it. They're going to scream at the top of their lungs that it matters so much that it decided these games. And now it's placed unbelievable pressure for baseball that the Astros succeed this year. Because I'm telling you, it's not good for baseball. And these players, it's not good for you if it's not good for baseball. If everybody blames an Astros bad season this year on them not being able to cheat. And it makes the last 3-4 years of baseball, since those video monitors were in dugouts, it puts it completely in question. And it's not a headline you want. So baseball as a collective, both the players, both the owners, can take something from the NFL, take something from the Shield. They are unified, they move forward, they make their events bigger, they put it at a reasonable time, they connect entertainment, music, commercials, business, all of it together into one event. And the World Series will never be the Super Bowl, at least not in our near future. But they can at least try. And Major League Baseball will never be the NFL. But you'd like to see them at least try. And in some ways they are. And in some ways they really aren't. On the other side of the break, I want to talk about that Mookie Betts trade. It's a big deal, okay? It should be a big deal. When will it get done is the question. We'll dive into it some more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Big welcome back into the program. Mookie Betts certainly on the move. Boston needs to clear money. Boston feels like they're in retreat mode after losing their general manager and manager due to this cheating scandal. And Boston needs to move on from a guy that's going to be really expensive, that probably won't help them win a World Series this year. And some Boston fans disagree with this. They think it's overreaction. They need to hold on to their best players. They certainly can afford it. Well, you can use some rationale. You can use some logic to understand why this move is being made. And a big reason why this move is being made is because this allows Boston to reset their cap, to reset their organization, to get prospects, and to kind of shift attention towards the future. Which you can agree with that, disagree with that. You can think Boston is ready sooner and they should be willing to spend that money, and they're a big enough organization that they should and could spend that money necessary to continue to compete at that level. But I look at it as it's not a horrible decision from Boston to understand that not even having a manager, we're 20 days from spring training, not having a plan, not having a front office, being a little out of sorts, being a little out of whack is damaging. And it's something that will make you pause as a manager. And it should make you pause as a general manager, as a owner, and say, why don't we reset here? Because paying this guy a lot of money just for our organization to take a tailspin, him being unhappy, or us holding on to him through this tailspin, and him not even choosing to re-sign with us, is probably a bad decision. Let's get some prospects. Let's get under the tax threshold. Let's reset this thing, and let's aim not for 2020, but for 2022, 2021. It's not a bad plan from Boston. And the Dodgers are in perfect position to take advantage of it. I recommend the Dodgers be patient. I recommended that last week. And we're seeing story after story come out from the wonderful reporters around Major League Baseball that this deal is certainly going to happen. The Padres remain in the discussion. But I think the only reason the Padres are remaining in this discussion is to make sure the Dodgers, their rival in their own division, pay a price that's worthy of Mookie Betts. Because if you're the Padres, signing a guy on a rental, giving up major league ready players now and high-level prospects to go get a guy that certainly won't stay just to maybe compete a little better in the division this year is not a good move. It's not a move that wins them a World Series. It's not a move that gets them, frankly, closer to a World Series. It's not a move that gets them a piece that's going to contribute long-term for their organization. It's a move that makes headlines. It's a move that'll sell a little more tickets this season, just in the first half of the season, and then it's a move that will backfire. And it might be a thing where you trade him at the deadline for an even less price than you gave up for him. But it'd be silly if the Padres completely dumped out of these discussions, because then the Dodgers are the only team at the negotiating table, and the Dodgers have all the power with the Red Sox, and the Dodgers will give up nothing, absolutely nothing, to get Mookie Betts. And if you're the Padres, you want to make sure that your division rival pays the price for a player of that level. And that's why I think the Padres are hanging around this discussion. I would be utterly shocked if the San Diego Padres ended up landing Mookie Betts. Now, the Dodgers, I think that's a question of when. They have plenty of room underneath the tax, and frankly, the Dodgers are willing to spend whatever amount of money it takes to win a World Series. 30-year gap for the Dodgers is an incredibly long time in between championships. It needs to end for that very powerful and very wealthy ownership group. It needs to end for them to stay relevant in the city of Los Angeles' sports landscape. It has to end. And the Dodgers will be willing to do anything to make it end. Now, they're a smart organization. They aren't going to give up the farm for Mookie when they know the only other team at the negotiating table is the Padres. And they know the Padres don't really want to make that move unless it is a beautiful get for them and they barely surrender anything, which the Red Sox simply aren't going to do because they know the Dodgers can outbid the Padres and the Dodgers are in better position for this entire thing, and the Dodgers do want Mookie Betts. So it's kind of a little bit of a Mexican standoff here. And it's one of those classic trade deals. But to me, the Dodgers hold all the cards. The Red Sox have already revealed that they need to get this deal done. They want to get this deal done. And they feel like they're backpedaling. They feel like they don't have leadership. So if I'm the Dodgers, I'm patient. You don't need Mookie Betts for the first half of the season. Why? Well, you're going to win the NL West anyway. You don't need Mookie Betts to win that division. Now, to win a World Series, you might need the help of a right-handed power bat that's plus in the field and plus on the base paths. Certainly, Mookie Betts helps every team in Major League Baseball right now get closer to a championship. And the Dodgers are a team for the last 7 years that's been really, really close to a championship. But you don't need him for the first half. If I'm the Dodgers, I make the Red Sox come down to my price that I'm willing to swallow, and I sit on it till the deadline. And if the Red Sox are really going to wait to the deadline, they better hope Mookie Betts stays healthy. They better hope Mookie Betts doesn't have a cold streak. And the Red Sox might panic here and fold to the Dodgers before spring training because this is something that the Red Sox don't want floating around their organization the entire season. It hurts ticket sales. You don't want your fans reading an article every single day that you're about to trade Mookie Betts. You want to get him traded. You want to get him out. Let the articles run. Let the criticism fly. Let it all happen before spring training. You get into camp. You promote some young prospects. You're like, hey, the future, we're moving forward. That's the headlines you want. You don't want to sit on a trade all year long. I think the Dodgers are going to get them. I think the Dodgers are going to get them at a price that they're excited about. And I think it'll make the Dodgers the World Series favorite this year. Now, will they do it? I don't know. They've been the best team in baseball, in my opinion, over the last 5 years. I think the Dodgers were better than the Astros all of 2017. They are so talented. Top to bottom, rotation, everything. They've had legendary players. It's unbelievable what the Los Angeles Dodgers have done over the last 7 years. And the fact that right now they'll go down in history as a failure because of their inability to win a World Series is scary for them. Scary for everybody that's been connected to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And honestly, scary for me because they are doing perfect team building and it's not working to get them a championship. You carry this level of team building, this level of star power and talent into any other of the major sports in the United States. Continuity with general managers and ownership and a strong fan base and a huge market and a lot of money and a lot of talent and great young prospects and a great way of doing business and a great culture, all these things the Dodgers have. No other sport would they have gone 7 years of this without winning a championship. And that's what the Dodgers have gone through. 7 years of running their organization to near perfection and not winning a championship. That wouldn't happen in football. A team run dominance like this, they certainly, with the type of star power the Dodgers have, with the fact that they've had World Series level rotations. They've had World Series level aces. The fact that they've had World Series level lineups. In an NFL team, if you had a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, a Super Bowl caliber run game, a Super Bowl caliber defense, and an offensive line, you'd win the Super Bowl. If you had that for 7 straight years, it would happen. It would happen one time at least. In the NBA, it would have happened 4 or 5 times. You'd been the Warriors borderline. And it would actually have fallen apart sooner because you have less players, more stars, more money committed. They would have got to their heads, championships, kind of dull things. It would have been a falling off period. But the Dodgers are sitting in this most interesting place because here they are, 7 straight years of near flawless organizational management, dominating your division, reaching 100 wins numerous times. Everything you need to win a World Series they have had, and they've had droves of, honestly, relief pitching, all of it. They've had all of it, and they haven't been able to get it done. So it's kind of scary for me as a fan of team building, as a fan of people doing the right things in organizations, making the right decisions, and coaching, building the correct culture, if they don't get this done. And that's why Mookie Betts to the Dodgers, to me, is a positive thing for baseball, because they can perhaps get closer to a World Series. Because it's not just they've thrown money at it, they're under the tax threshold right now. They have really done this the right way. I've loved the way the Los Angeles Dodgers have done it. And acquiring Mookie Betts on a really smart deal, that would be good news for the Dodgers. And I think good news for baseball, because everybody will reflect their model of team building, which isn't tanking, which isn't anything like this. It's spending money. It's trying to win games constantly, doing things the right way, make good draft picks, develop your players, good minor league system. They have done everything right. That is how all baseball teams should try to operate. And I get all baseball teams don't have their budget or their fan base or their tradition, but the Dodgers winning a World Series and people following their model is good for baseball. On the other side of the break, analytics versus tradition. Analytics versus tradition. That's what we'll talk about on the other side of the break. I'll dive into exactly what that means. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. Check out all the great podcasts on the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Social media, relationship, you name it, we have it here at GSMC. Analytics versus tradition. It's a classic argument in baseball that's kind of ending. Analytics is winning. Why? Management, style. The teams winning championships are getting younger. They're getting more analytic driven. They are getting more analytic focused. And the argument is winning towards analytics. But the reason I want to talk about this and dive into this exact argument is because it's important that we understand there is balance in everything, right? I'm not a religious guy. I'm a big Star Wars fan, though. And I think that Star Wars teaches us a really valuable lesson, not just for like the wide scope of life, but specifically for sports and everything we do, is that balance is important. Balance, life, death, light, dark. It's the center of everything that happens in our world. Your money being made might be taking away somebody else's money. That's balance. And I think it's important in sports, and we see this all the time. We see it in the NFL. You need balance. You need to be able to run the ball. You need to be able to throw the ball. You need to have a good defense. You need balance. And in baseball, I think the most successful organizations have learned to balance analytics and traditional approaches. Because in a baseball organization, you can't analytic and number your way to championships. Because as much as baseball is statistically tracked, as much as baseball feels like it is almost a number simulation year by year, it is a game played by men. Men with families, men with goals, men with dreams, men with ambitions to make more money, men who have to work out in the offseason, men who have to keep their at-bats and pitches seen up, men who suffer injuries, men who have to get along with each other. All these things are certainly a huge part of baseball, a huge part of any sport. And if you just want to run an organization by the numbers, be my guest, but it's going to offend some people. Why? Because baseball players don't think they're numbers. They play the game. They've always played the game. And most of the time, they haven't had numbers. Right? You know, I've coached in a youth sports league. How many people are keeping stats in youth sports? About nobody. It wasn't about the numbers when they were 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. A lot of high schools around this country don't keep stats and look at the analytics and the numbers. When they grew up in this game, when baseball players grew up in this game, they were taught the traditional side of things. They were taught how to win individual games. They were taught how to win moments. They were taught about good at-bats and these things that are not numbers driven. Now, maybe that's changing a little bit, but still get in the bat, get in the box, swing the bat hard, hit it. Like, these things are simple. These things are more than analytics. These things are more than number. They are the traditional way of teaching and coaching and playing the game. And that will always exist. Why? Because in singular moments, in singular games, it's not numbers, it's moments. You have to make an athletic decision. You have to decide whether to swing or to hit it, whether to swing or to take it, rather, whether to put it to the opposite field or pull it, whether to throw your sinker or your changeup. And we can run all the numbers we want, but individual moments in baseball, and this is why the playoffs are a crapshoot. Run the numbers all you want, saying that this will only work or happen 3% of the time. But in individual moments, it's got a chance to happen, right? And baseball players run through those moments and run through those numbers themselves in terms of they played this game a long, long time and they want to keep playing it the way they played it. And what I mean by all this is that you need balance. This is why I love Dusty Baker going to the Astros. He is balanced. He understands that, yes, these numbers and things, frankly, I didn't grow up with them when I was a manager. I didn't play with them. He might not even understand them. I don't even know if Dusty Baker is reading fan graphs and really is diving into all the numbers and splits. And he might just listen to the front office, the numbers they want, the type of lineups they want to see. But he also knows how to communicate to players, how to see something in the middle of a game. You're 2 at-bats in, and, well, you know, that pitcher's kind of leading you outside. You got to maybe get a little closer to the plate. A simple thing like that could be the absolute difference in everything. Maybe motivating a guy in a different way than everybody else is super important, because why? He's a human. He needs motivation. Just because a guy has batted .286 his whole life, and I get it's a large sample size, and that most of the time it actually works out. The numbers are usually within the margin of error because all these guys tend to try hard. But just because a guy batted .286 last year doesn't mean he's going to bat .286 next year. He's got to produce. He has to be motivated. He has to be focused. He has to understand his responsibilities in an at-bat, understand his responsibilities within the scope of a game. All these things are important. All these things are tradition-based. All these things are analytics-less. You cannot measure them. You can't measure a guy's confidence. You can't measure a guy's motivation. You can't measure his drive to succeed. You'll never be able to measure it. And that's what makes sports so beautiful, is that although we can boil it down to all these numbers, and although baseball can be run essentially in a simulation, and it's going to get it pretty right a lot of the times, these simulations, because there's 162 games, because it's a huge sample size, because there is not a lot of variability, because a lot of people are trying to get better and a lot of people are naturally motivated. But the difference between championship teams and division-winning teams and the team in the middle, it's not talent most of the time, because the talent gap is, it's not very large. There is talent gaps between teams, but it's not very large. They're all professional baseball players. They all can hit home runs. It's about focus. It's about motivation. It's about confidence in what you're doing and what your team's doing. It's about coming to work and having fun when you're at work because your manager is doing or saying the right things or runs the operation the correct way. And baseball forgot that for a little bit, and we're starting to see it be a balance. Luis Rojas for the Mets, experience with players, experience in locker rooms, and experience with analytics. Balance is important. Remember that. In everything you do, everything you're involved in, everything you coach, everything you play, balance is crucial. Balance is necessary. In analytics versus tradition, I know it's an argument that's almost died out. Analytics is clearly one, right? But we need to remember the traditional nature of baseball, of not being scared of getting hit by a pitch, right? Simple things that you teach kids in high school. Teaching guys, men, during seasons, teaching them a new way of doing things or motivating them or getting them focused are still hugely important in successful championship baseball teams. And that's important to remember. On the other side of the break, something else that's important, quality at-bats. I've got a little bit of a coaching experience, and I want to share how I like to teach quality at-bats, how I like to emphasize to people why a smart at-bat is important. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. Just talked about analytics versus tradition, how balance is so crucial, how balance is so important, how balance essentially defines everything in life, especially a game like baseball, when the smallest of differences in confidence and focus can be the difference in whether you win or lose or everything. It's everything. Confidence and balance and all those things. I've had a lot of experience teaching high schoolers and younger than high schoolers the game of baseball. It's been a lot of fun teaching these guys and teaching kids. And one thing that's really important to teach that really isn't taught, and honestly, this is the answer I usually get from people that are youth coaches or people that have even experience in baseball, is kids can't understand that. You shouldn't teach kids that. And what it is smart at-bats. What it is being disciplined at the plate, right? And people want to teach kids don't swing at pitches outside of the strike zone. But being selective at the plate, seeing pitches, being patient is an idea that is difficult to get into kids' heads while keeping them aggressive enough to be able to hit the ball. It's a difficult balance, I admit that. But one thing I want, if you're going to be a youth coach, if you're going to have a kid and teach them the game, I want everybody out there to know kids are way, way, way smarter than you think. Kids can learn just about anything. You just got to teach it to them in the right way. So if the reason you don't want to do something or don't want to emphasize something that is hugely important in a sport or in math or in science, because they won't understand it. They're just a kid. They won't know that. That's not a reason to not teach them it. Right? Maybe don't emphasize it the same way. Maybe don't complicate it the same way. But you can certainly teach them it. It's certainly going to help. It's certainly going to assist them moving forward. And I think it's ridiculous to think that kids can't learn something. Because I've seen kids learn anything. And that's important to remember, especially when we talk about this. So what do I mean by a smart at-bat? What do I mean by a quality at-bat? It's something that is really developed in the analytics era. It's something that was emphasized by Billy Beane and Moneyball. We're seeing it turn a little bit where the first pitch, you want to be a little more aggressive on the first pitch because it might be the best pitch you see all at-bat. But it's still highly emphasized. Smart at-bats, quality at-bats, working pitch counts, getting on base. These are hugely important things in baseball. Things that used to never be emphasized. It was you grip it and rip it, baby. First pitch you see you think you're going to hit, smack it. So how do you teach kids this? Well, one, reward quality at-bats. If your kid sees 5 pitches and then strikes out on the 6th, it's a good at-bat. Tell them, good at-bat. Way to see some pitches. You fouled a couple off. Good at-bat. Emphasize that they were successful. So the only I kept stats for when I coached 7th and 8th grade baseball. I kept stats. The only stats I shared with them were quality at-bat percentage. And for pitching, I shared strike percentage. So quality at-bat percentage and strike percentage. I constantly shared with them. Now, every 2 weeks I'd update them on the classic stats, batting average, home runs, RBIs, all that good stuff. Right? Well, because kids understand that. Kids like those classic stats. I love those classic stats. I love talking about slash lines and dingers and RBIs just as much as the next guy. But as a coach, if you emphasize that the only stats that matter in terms of how you're making lineups are the amount of quality at-bats you have, and for pitchers, the percentage of strikes you throw, and then as a coach, you make some more decisions based on hard hit ball percentage, based on raw on base percentage, et cetera, you're emphasizing the importance of that event. You're saying if you get a quality at-bat, that will up your quality at-bat percentage, and your quality at-bat percentage decides where you are in the lineup most of the time. Obviously, there are other factors. Obviously, there's eye test. Most youth leagues have really small sample sizes. So your best, very clearly best player might have a bad statistical start. That doesn't mean you move him down to the 9 spot. Again, there's nuance. Again, there's balance to all this. But emphasizing the importance of that is crucial. Especially if you're a youth sports coach, pitch counts are awfully important. And winning games is important too, because winning games, the kids have more fun. They're more locked into what you're doing. So it's not about winning in youth sports. It's about the process. But the process seems to always work better when teams win. Do you understand what I'm saying? Winning is a result of good process. So you should focus as a coach on winning. It's not all about winning. You don't do anything to win. You still make sure kids get playing time. You still make sure you do your process correctly. But a solid process leads to winning games. And it's good to have a goal that, hey, we're winning games, we're doing the process right, and it all works into each other. And it's going to help you win games at the youth level if you have kids having good at-bats, not swinging at bad pitches. And a bad pitch to swing at is a first pitch fastball that's painting the corner. It's a bad pitch to swing at. Why? You might ground out. You probably will ground out. Let it go. Go down 0-1. You're fine. Foul pitches off you're not comfortable with. Another thing I really like to do, break down the strike zone into squares. And then you go left to right, 1, 2, 3 at the top, 4, 5, 6 in the middle, 7, 8, 9 on the bottom. And you have kids talk about where they feel most comfortable hitting the baseball. Obviously, the middle of the plate should be one. Some kids like it outside, some kids like it inside. And it's important to have conversations and communicate these ideas with them. Ask what they think. Ask where they're confused. And then try to fill in the gaps. And if you think kid's smart enough and ready to handle it, say, okay, you should have this in mind when you go to the plate. Zones 1, 2, 4, and 5 on 0-0, 3-0 if I have a green light, 2-1 even, and 3-1 are my hot zones, 2-0 especially. That means only those zones am I going to swing at it on those counts. Now, this is a complex idea. This is an idea that you don't want to overemphasize, but it's a good idea to introduce because it at least is somewhere in their head like, hey, I don't have to swing at every strike. You don't have to swing at every strike. You get 3 of them. You need to swing at good pitches. Good pitches to hit, we hit. Bad pitches to hit, we leave. Unless there's 2 strikes, then good pitches to hit, we hit. Bad pitches to hit, we foul off. And that's how we have good at-bats. That's how we draw walks. That's how we get men on base. That's how we see more good pitches. And these are very, very, very important ideas for baseball success moving forward, especially in today's age. Now, a quality at-bat is not striking out looking, right? Well, unless you fouled off a bunch of pitches and was on the corner, and you can excuse that. But emphasizing what makes a quality at-bat, how to get there, what you need to do to have a quality at-bat is super important. And the way you teach it is you just introduce it piece by piece. Emphasize the positive of a walk. A walk is just as good as a hit. Just as good as a hit. Or, frankly, I think it might be better than getting a hit on a first pitch. Why? Because you made the pitcher throw 4 pitches. And it's going to get way more in a pitcher's head if he starts walking guys than if you hit a few line drive singles or a bloop single. And it's important to emphasize these things. So remember, quality at-bats, break it down into zones, understand and emphasize the importance of these at-bats, reward them, and make the most important statistics on your team the quality at-bat percentage, which is a stat that's run by Game Changer, but you can track it yourself. Here's a quality at-bat. Anything that leads to you getting on base other than a reached on air qualifies as a quality at-bat, or any at-bat that sees more than 5 pitches, or any at-bat that ends in a hard hit ball, because that means you swung at a good pitch. So if you nail a line drive, if you swing at the first pitch and nail a line drive at the shortstop, that was a quality at-bat because you hit the ball hard, you swung at a good pitch, and you had bad luck, you didn't get out, but that's still a quality at-bat. See 5 or more pitches, quality at-bat. Hit the ball hard, quality at-bat. Get on base, quality at-bat. Reach on an air, not a quality at-bat. Strike out in 3 pitches, not a quality at-bat. So it's a really easy stat to track, and it's a stat to emphasize. It doesn't tell the whole story. No stat does, and there's so much more to coaching than just this one stat, but emphasizing being smart at the plate, emphasizing the game of chess that is baseball, will turn your best athletes into great ball players and your worst athletes into good ball players, and all you need is a team of good ball players to win a bunch of games. And that's the end of the show. Hope you enjoyed today's edition. Understand it's a little bit shorter, but news is short in the world of baseball. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. Follow all the great shows in the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. I thank you so much for listening. This has been the GSMC Baseball Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll talk to you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.